what time is it now? We've got about 12 minutes, and I was invited to wrap up and do just talk to you. And but I've only got 12 minutes now, so I'm not going to launch into it. But what I wanted to tell you about is it was actually something it's about looking after yourselves, right? Looking after yourselves and taking care of yourselves. And I thought I would talk about this book I've written called You're Still Hot to Me, The Joys of Menopause. And I came out in 2014, right? But only recently I was on the Today Show with a doctor and Georgie Gardner, and they're talking about menopause. And then this doctor, Dr. Penny Adams, held up my book and said, "This is the definitive book on menopause I recommend to all my patients." And then no one could buy it because it was out of print, apparently. But I know, because I don't keep an eye on those things, but it's coming back in print. But the thing, I did write this book because I found when I hit menopause, there were all, I'm a woman's liver, right? I burnt my bra, and then I discovered gravity and I put it back on again. They weren't called the swinging 60s for nothing. But I embraced body hair. I am not ashamed of it or afraid of it anymore. Like, I only shaved my ankles today. The rest of it I'm really comfortable with. And we were the generation that used the word vulva out loud without shame. We talked about our vulva being like a rose, and we looked at it with mirrors, and we brought it out in the open literally because we didn't wear undies, remember? Who didn't wear undies? Yeah. Thank you, one person. Very liberating. You could actually pee standing up. What did you say? No, Dad? Oh, no, not with a mini skirt. Oh, well, yes, actually, but never mind. But, we looked at our vaginas and our vulvas with a mirror. And I remember when I have two daughters, and I gave them a mirror, and I said to them, I want you to look at your beautiful genitals. And I want you to be as familiar with your genitals as your girlfriends or boyfriends will be. And they said to Mum, they said to me, Mum, what a great idea. That's really fantastic. No, they didn't. They said, Mum, you are so gross. And they walked out. Anyway, one of my daughters actually came to one of my talks recently, and she came up to me later and she said, Mum, when you gave me that mirror, I was 6. I was a new mother, I'm just trying to do the right thing. I go, 6? And when I was growing up, so I'm a women's liver, but it came out of that time when I was growing up, when periods were seen as humiliating and a secret, and they were shameful, and you were always embarrassed by them. Remember, you'd go into a pharmacy, there was no tampons. You could only use a tampon when I was growing up. If you were a bit racy, you used a tampon. You couldn't use a tampon if you were a virgin. And we only had tampons with applicators because they were a little less yucky. I don't know why my mum wouldn't let me use tampons. I think she thought I might enjoy inserting them, leading to lifelong promiscuity. I don't know. Maybe she thought I would deflower myself. I'm not sure. But I worked in a chemist shop, and in those days, Modess were the pads, remember? And my job was to put brown paper around the Modess, and then they were stored under the counter next to the condoms, under the counter. And then a woman would come in, and she'd come up to the counter, and I'd say, may I help you? And she'd say, I'd like some Modess, please. Really, secretly, I'd like some Modess. And then I go, oh my God, she must be bleeding. And I'd get really embarrassed, and she would be really embarrassed, and I'd be going, oh my God, she's menstruating. And I'd get the Modess, and I'd quickly slip them into a bag before anyone could possibly guess she was probably menstruating and possibly a woman. And when I say slip them into a bag, bear in mind that in those days a packet of Modess was the size of a small pillow. So then what happened? So fast forward years, then we had women's lib, then I get menopause, right? And I'm getting these hot flushes, and I'm thinking, oh, I must be getting menopause. And then I was having sleepless nights, and I go into the chemist shop, and behind the counter was a menopausal woman, well-groomed, possibly my age. And I said to her, look, I think I've got, I think I'm getting menopause, because I said, the doona's going off, the doona's going on, my husband has hypothermia, garlic, chocolates, wine isn't working, what's up? And she glanced furtively around the shop. And then she mouthed the words, hot flushes. She didn't even say it, she mouthed them. Hot flushes. As if it was something to be ashamed of. As if it was something I should be embarrassed about. As if she was saying to me, your nipple is showing. I was shocked. This is a woman who, would happily say, oh, genital warts, oh, here's some cream over here. Just take your pick. Hemorrhoids, fantastic. But she would no more say hot flushes out loud than she would say Voldemort lives. So I was shocked by this. And so I started realizing that women it was a taboo subject. It was one that women didn't really talk about, and they didn't share it. They might have talked about hot flushes, but they didn't like to talk about menopause, certainly not in the workplace. In fact, recently, ARI, the Australian Human Resources Institute, did some research, and they found that only 4% of women in the workplace will talk about menopause at work. 4%. You remember when we couldn't say, if we don't talk about it, it's going to have misinformation, there's going to be fear. And the reason women don't talk about it is that they're afraid. They're afraid that menopause will age them, that they will be past their use-by date, that they will be sidelined for leadership positions. And all this is bullshit. I mean, really, the statistics are that women are at when they're in menopausal age, they know so much. They're the elders that we were hearing about. They're full of experience and knowledge and wisdom. Mostly their children are pretty grown up, so they're getting the big picture now. They can focus on themselves and what they're doing in their work. It's a great time of life. In fact, in my book I said that the only other species to go through menopause were the great apes. And then I've since found out that the great apes only go through menopause in captivity. I know, how weird. Then I'm starting to think, are we in captivity? We women? Maybe if we were free, we wouldn't go through menopause. But there is one species that does go through menopause, and that is the killer whale. Killer whales go through menopause. And recently there was research by these English researchers who wanted to know why, when killer whales went through menopause, why didn't they just die? Because this is the imperative of the species, survival. And if you can't actually breed anymore, what is your use to the species? And what they found out was that menopausal whales, when the pod was under threat, knew where the safe place was to go. They knew where to get the food. They knew how to look after the pod and help its survival. So go menopause. Thank you. So I rang Mum. I said, Mum, did you go through menopause? And she said, oh my God, it was the worst 5 years of my life. I just want to tell you this one story. I said, 5 years? Worst 5 years? This is a woman who went through the Great Depression and World War II. I said to her, why didn't you talk about it? Because Mum talked about everything with us, I thought. And she said, well, we just didn't. We never talked about menopause. And then I realized that, her mother would never have talked about menopause. At the turn of the century, the average lifespan for a woman in Australia was 57. So, not this century, in 1900, was 57. So you'd sort of hit menopause and you'd die. So, well, it was the least of your worries. But then in my research, because I couldn't understand why this secrecy, up until the 1930s, this is when my mother was alive and, my grandmother, up until the 1930s, if you sort of expressed any symptoms of menopause, if you got a little bit willful, if you got mood swings, probably not up, if you got a bit willful, a bit feisty, if you started giving your kids a burnt chop, You could be diagnosed with climacteric insanity and locked up. And when you were locked up, they would shave your head for the hot flushes. If you had flooding, which can be a symptom, they put radioactive rods into your vagina. They would dose you up with opium, which you actually deserved by then. This was for menopause. This is for women of a certain age who exhibited any sort of willfulness or feistiness. This did not happen to men of a certain age who were willful and assertive. They got elected to Parliament. You know, climacteric insanity was still on that, you know, that medical book called whatever it is that defines illnesses, that book, that was still in there up until the 1970s. No wonder women got quiet about menopause. No wonder they got freaking quiet. I mean, I saw a show the other day about Prince Philip's mother who was locked up in her 40s, and I thought, they didn't mention menopause, but I thought, I bet that's menopause. I bet she was going through menopause. And then, you know, I said to my mum, you worked for doctors at the time. She was a secretary at the local clinic. I said, didn't you talk to the doctors about your menopause? You know, the worst 5 years of your life? And she said, no, of course not. Of course not. They would have just said it was women's problems. And then my dad, who I thought was watching a Clint Eastwood movie, he said, women's problems are men's problems. Then he rode off into the sunset. In fact, I think my mother handled menopause really well when I look back on it. She used to come home from work and sit in a rocking chair in the corner, rocking backwards and forwards with a bottle of sherry. And when we came home from school, she used to say, why don't you get some chocos off the back fence for dinner? I haven't shopped or something. Make your own. I know that, in fact, what happened to my mum is that she had a hysterectomy and was put on antidepressants, Librium and Valium and a whole lot of shit. And she nearly died from the hysterectomy. And this is the 70s, you know. So it's only been recently that all these fantastic treatments are around. And what I discovered, and I'm not going to keep you for long because I usually talk for an hour about this non-stop, but what I discovered, I know, I took 3 years to research this book, right? I was just going to do funny stories, but then I realized I actually wanted the facts because there's so many flaky websites. What happened in 2002 when HRT, that whole thing linked it with breast cancer, and then all these women stopped using HRT. And if you've got severe symptoms, HRT is the only thing that will stop severe symptoms. And I'm talking about symptoms that affect your quality of life and your ability to be a fully functioning person. You know, one woman was telling me her hot flushes, they ran down her face, down her elbows, and would drip off her elbows, and then she'd pass out. I mean, I'm talking severe symptoms, and, you know, marriages break down, women leave work because they think they're not coping at work, but they're actually not coping with their menopause symptoms. So you've got to get the right treatment. So we had all the HRT scare in 2002. In 2012, it was all debunked, and the report came out that said that it made a mistake. Actually, they used age groups chronologically. You know, they used women 60 to 69, 70 to 79, when your incidence of breast cancer and things like that is going to increase anyway. But you never hear about that. So you've got all these women who went off HRT who are suffering, and they went on to bioidentical hormones, which is a marketing term, not a medical term. As one professor told me, if you wanted bioidentical hormones, you'd have to take a woman's ovaries and crush them up. I said, thank you for that image. And women went onto herbs and things like that, which are not benign. So, look, I just want to say menopause, I know you're leaving, you have to go. Menopause is a great time of life. It's a fantastic time of life. You can, you know, if you lose your libido, you can get something for your libido. Women have libidos. I've talked to a woman, she's been on HRT, she has it for her sex drive. She lives alone. She said, I'm not driving anywhere. But she said, I love the way it makes me feel. I like the energy, she said. I like the energy it gives me. And she said, you know, no amount of adult pottery courses can replace that. Anyway, you're free when you have, you know, no more periods. You can wear white jeans. free to go out with nothing more than a credit card and a winning smile tucked in your Nancy Gantz. All that money you save on sanitary products you can spend on wine and facials and chocolate and movies and books. You're free to go swimming any time of the year without attracting sharks. It's a great time of year, but you got to get the right, look, I don't want to tell you just how to suck eggs, but you got to get the right advice. So many doctors still prescribe antidepressants. Can you believe it? They do. They would rather do that than go down the HRT track. So get the right information. Look, I'll just tell you a quick story about my parents, and then you can go. Then you're free to leave. In fact, you can go now. I don't care. Just walk out while I'm talking. But I went with my mum and dad to the Gosford Leagues Club for lunch at the Chinese restaurant, and Mum said to me, this is about 6 months ago. She said, Jean, there's not many couples in our walking group or the bowls group. Roy, your father and I are about the only couple. And I was, I'm always thinking about menopause. And I said, oh, well, it was probably because of menopause, Mum. A lot of relationships break down because one person doesn't want to have sex anymore and nobody can talk about it and they don't come to an arrangement. And she said, oh, well, that didn't happen to your father and I. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, we still have sex. Like 92 she was then, and he was 90. I said, what do you mean you still have sex? She said, oh, yes, we still have. I said, I didn't even think you liked sex. I'm sure she said she didn't like sex. And Mum's tucking into this huge plate of garlic prawns, which she eats by herself. She doesn't share. She goes, oh, yes, I was just thinking the other day, your sister said to me, oh, you look well. And I thought, that's because I've been having sex all week. And then Dad said it's the same sex, it just takes a week. And I'm feeling sick, right? I am feeling sick. And the other thing is they're both deaf, so it's like Otoyo and other diners, people getting their Peking duck going, oh. I was telling a friend and she said, oh, that's why there's so many accidents on the M1, which is the freeway from the central coast of Sydney. She said, because everyone's found out their parents are still having sex and they're driving going, I can't bear that. And the real problem was that I built a granny flat, right? Under my house. And I've got a 19-year-old and a 25-year-old who was still living at home. And I thought, oh, my God, my daughters are going to be having sex upstairs. My mum and dad are going to be having sex downstairs. My husband and I will be the only people in the house not having sex. And that's the sandwich generation. Enjoy your afternoons. What a great conference. Thank you so much. I hope I haven't kept you. Thank you so much. It's been amazing. Oh,